Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's Saturday, time for the injury report for Week 11. And based on all of this news, I will update my final rankings. We're going to start with the positive news. There's 11 teams who have healthy rosters. So if you have any Atlanta Falcons, Baltimore Ravens, Chicago Bears, Cleveland Browns, Indianapolis Colts, LA Chargers, LA Rams, Miami Dolphins, Minnesota Vikings, New England Patriots, or Tennessee Titans, any of those players for fantasy specifically are healthy. You don't have to worry about them for this game. So 11 teams, that's a third of the league, is healthy. And then 4 teams are on bye: the Arizona Cardinals, Carolina Panthers, New York Giants, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So kind of irrelevant in this video. And on Thursday, the Eagles and Commanders already played. So more than half the NFL is kind of irrelevant in this video, at least on offense, for your fantasy team. But let's begin with the players on the injury report. In Buffalo, Keon Coleman has been ruled out since the beginning of the week. We've known that since Tuesday, basically, and Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel should step up in his absence. But I do believe Amari Cooper will play. He is questionable with a wrist injury and limited all week in practice. I do expect him to play. He was limited last week. He didn't suit up for the second week in a row, and I think they were just saving him for this game. We know it's an important rivalry against the Chiefs. They're on bye after this. I think Amari Cooper will play. So that's positive news. But the tight end Dalton Kincaid, as I mentioned yesterday in the tight end ranks, is out. And that means Dawson Knox. He's actually an interesting streamer. I have him ranked like top 12 this week. Dawson Knox is legit, but I think James Cook and Amari Cooper are the main benefactors from this injury report. Cooper's still a game time decision. You want to make sure, but I do think he'll play. In Cincinnati, great news for T. Higgins. It's a Sunday night game, and he is activated. He will play on Sunday. So that means Burrow is a little safer, but you're already starting him. He's been great lately. And Mike Gesicki does lose value. Gesicki only really plays well when Higgins is not on the field. And that's really the only news in Cincinnati. Zach Moss remains on IR. So does tight end Eric All Jr. His season is over. In Dallas, Dak Prescott is out, but basically on IR. He just had surgery. He will be out for the season. Brandon Cooks remains on IR, so nothing too much different in Dallas. Cooper Rush, Trey Lance are the quarterback duos. I think we will see Trey Lance soon on the field, and the Dallas offense does lose value because of it. The Texans defense is a good play this week. In Denver, Josh Reynolds was practicing this week but remains on IR, not coming back on the field. So Devon Valley, who stepped up in his absence, scored a touchdown last week, is viable as a potential dart throw, mainly in DFS. I'm not interested in regular fantasy formats. But in Detroit, Sam LaPorta is out, as I mentioned yesterday. So Brock Wright will see increased snaps in this game. And LaPorta didn't practice at all this week with a shoulder injury. Maybe it's more than just a 1-week absence for LaPorta. But Jamison Williams also benefits, I think. Him and Brock Wright gain a bit of value in the ranks. In Green Bay, Luke Musgrave remains on IR, so if you were trusting Tucker Kraft up until this point, you can still keep rolling him out there. Marshawn Lloyd has been on IR since like week 3, remains out. Limited in practice Wednesday, Thursday, but then didn't practice Friday with appendicitis. He will not step back on the field. So the backup to Jacobs remains Emmanuel Wilson, still kind of irrelevant in fantasy, but Jordan Love is healthy. He got some much needed rest after the bye. In Houston, Stephon Diggs remains on IR, out for the year, but they are getting Dameon Pierce back from injury. He is active, but the big news is really Nico Collins off of IR. He's missed 5 weeks, and he was full on Friday with his hamstring injury. He is good to go. He will play on Monday. So like T. Higgins, the games on Sunday night and Monday don't have as many options to pivot to, and that's great positive news. You don't have to worry about that with Higgins or Nico Collins. In Indianapolis, as I mentioned, they are healthy, but in case you were worried about Michael Pittman, he is active. He did not suit up last week. So with his return, he was full in practice all week with a back injury. Previous to that, I do think Josh Downs is slightly safer, but given the change at quarterback, Downs is kind of the same option. Pittman is more interesting, and that does plummet the value for both A.D. Mitchell and Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce was a little more interesting without Pittman, but now not as safe of a play. Pittman is in that low end, probably benching flex territory. In Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence remains out, and they're optimistic he'll be back for week 13, but that's after the bye, and maybe he misses more than that. We don't know for sure, but at the moment, it's still Mac Jones getting the start, second week in a row, and with Christian Kirk on IR, there's supposed to be more volume available for other players, but with Mac Jones, it's just not really valuable targets. So Brian Thomas, although he is active with that chest injury, he was limited all week. He's off the injury report. I don't think he's the safest bet given Jones is his quarterback. So that's not good. It's just a benefit for the Vikings defense, but you can trust Travis Etienne a little bit more because Tank Bigsby has officially been ruled out. So there isn't as much of a timeshare with no Bigsby, and Etienne's role is pretty secure. Dearness Johnson is his backup, not someone you're starting. In Kansas City, JuJu Smith-Schuster is active. He's missed some time. Full on Thursday and Friday in practice. He will play. No concern for JuJu. But with DeAndre Hopkins in the mix, I don't really see a big role for JuJu anymore. You never know. He could score a touchdown, but similar to Justin Watson, not really the safest start in your lineup. But interesting development with their kicker, Harrison Butker, arguably the best kicker in the NFL, is on IR. Going to miss at least 4 games. They did upgrade Spencer Schrader, who last week kicked for the Jets. So weird situation with Butker. He may not be back until the playoffs. Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown are on IR, but Isiah Pacheco remains on IR as well. His 21-day practice window was open this week, and he may return next week in week 12 or potentially week 13. But I don't think he'll be back later than that. I do think he'll be back in November, but not in this game. He was already ruled out, and hopefully he'll be back next week, but not at the moment. Kareem Hunt remains their starter. In LA for the Rams, Tyler Higbee is out. He's been on IR all season long, but according to Sean McVay, the quote would be he's a couple of weeks away. So at the moment, Davis Allen has overtaken Colby Parkinson, and he remains their tight end, but maybe Tyler Higbee will be the guy starting week 13. In Las Vegas, Michael Mayer, questionable. He was activated off of IR, and it looks like he will play, but he's been pretty irrelevant with Brock Bowers. Even when healthy, he hasn't played in a long time, but Harrison Bryant, the other backup tight end, is out as well. So he probably sees the field more so just as a blocker, but Aiden O'Connell is on IR. Gardner Minshew will get the start. They teased Desmond Ridder this week, but it looks like Minshew retains his job security, at least to start the game. Maybe not to finish it. In Minnesota, Will Reichert, the kicker, is on IR. So second week for John Parker Romo as kicker. But Aaron Jones is active. We were worried about his rib injury, but given he returned in the late fourth quarter last week, it's not a surprise. He will play this week. Limited all week in practice. He's 29. Maybe there's still a role for Akers, but obviously Cam Akers is not as interesting as I thought on Tuesday. So Akers moves down the board. Aaron Jones will play. It's a good matchup against Tennessee. In New Orleans, Chris Olave is on IR, so is Rashid Shaheed and Bub Means, along with Kendry Miller. And for the second week in a row, Jamal Williams is out once again. So Taysom Hill is kind of the backup running back. Alvin Kamara going to get a lot of volume once again, but it looks like Cedrick Wilson Jr. might play. Last week he did not suit up, but he's been questionable with a shoulder injury, limited all week in practice. So I think he does have a shot here. I think he will be their number one receiver, but against Denzel Ward, it's not the best matchup overall. So maybe less targets for MVS, but MVS kind of has the same value even with Wilson on the field. But I do rank Cedrick Wilson a little less optimism for tight ends like Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau, though. Derek Carr maybe is a little bit more interesting. Probably not enough to start. In the Jets offense, Allen Lazard is on IR, so is kicker Greg Zuerlein, but Davante Adams remains questionable. According to the ESPN website, I couldn't really piece together too much info, but I think it may just be like veteran rest why he's still on the injury report. I do expect him to play. At the moment, though, it's a game time decision. I don't know the entire situation for Adams, but they have a bye after this game. I think he'll play. Make sure, but if he doesn't, I think the only player who benefits would be Tyler Conklin. It's kind of the same situation for Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So you want to make sure, but at the moment, Adams is still questionable. I think he'll play. In Pittsburgh, Najee Harris is active for this one. He did not practice Wednesday with an ankle injury, but then was full on Thursday and Friday. Meanwhile, Jaylen Warren is listed as questionable with a back injury, a new situation that cropped up Thursday. He did not practice at all. So weird situation. As soon as I trade for him in the subscriber league the next day, he does not practice, and I am not excited about it. I am a bit worried, but he at least returned in limited capacity on Friday, and he is a game time 50-50 decision. I think maybe 51-49. I think he'll probably suit up, but a game time decision with a Thursday new injury, never ideal. You want to make sure if you're trusting Jaylen Warren. I kind of like the matchup in the passing game for him against Baltimore. But if he does not suit up, then Najee Harris obviously is a bit safer. Cordarrelle Patterson would be the backup and obviously would be a slightly more interesting pivot as a handcuff. But not expecting too much. I do still think Jaylen Warren will play. But rookie wide receiver Roman Wilson out of Michigan remains on IR, will not step on the field this week. In Seattle, DK Metcalf is active with a knee injury. He missed the previous 2 games before the bye, but full all week in practice. He will suit up. So that's good news for him. Great news for Geno. And interestingly, Noah Fant remains out. He missed the game before the bye and he didn't practice. So he's not going to play. AJ Barner would step up at tight end behind him. But I think those targets mainly just go to JSN and Tyler Lockett, maybe one additional for DK Metcalf. But Noah Fant being out makes me a little more confident in the floor with DK. Last team to mention in San Francisco, Brandon Ayuk on IR, so is Elijah Mitchell, but the only other player on the injury report would be George Kittle. Everyone else would be healthy. Kittle is dealing with a hamstring injury. He didn't practice Wednesday, but then was limited Thursday and Friday, and I really don't think he even needs to practice that much in order to start. So I trust him. I think he will suit up, but he's a game time decision. You want to make sure. If he does miss, Austin Seibert might be more interesting, but I think Ricky Pearsall would be the main benefactor in that situation. But I do think Kittle will play. I'm not too worried about it. So those are all the offensive injury news. I do want to mention some defensive players, though, where there's a lot more injuries on defense at this time in the season. In Atlanta, 3 of their corners, Mike Hughes, D. Alford, and Antonio Hamilton, are all out against Denver. So maybe Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton have a slightly better connection. In Baltimore, safety Kyle Hamilton appears to be active. We were worried about him earlier in the week, so that's good news. They really need him in that secondary. But cornerback Arthur Maulet is out, and rookie TJ Tampa, also in the secondary, is on IR. Defensive tackle Michael Pierce on IR. Defensive tackle Travis Jones is questionable in Baltimore. In Buffalo, linebacker Matt Milano is still on IR. Linebacker Balin Spector also placed on IR. In Chicago, safety Jaquan Brisker is out. Montez Sweat is questionable. And safety Trevarius Moore also questionable with a concussion. Jaquan Brisker has missed like 5 games with a concussion. That's kind of strange for a head injury, but better safe than sorry, I guess. In Cincinnati, defensive end Trey Hendrickson is questionable. He did not travel with the team, but is expected to travel on his own and is likely to suit up. So as long as he doesn't miss his plane, I think Hendrickson will be fine on Sunday night against the Chargers. In Dallas, cornerback Deron Bland off of IR. His practice window is opened, questionable to suit up. He didn't practice on Thursday. Cornerback Jordan Lewis, his teammate, also didn't practice Thursday. Both of them are out for Sunday. In Detroit, defensive tackle Broderick Martin on IR, linebacker Derek Barnes on IR, cornerback Emmanuel Mosley on IR, safety Ifeatu Melifonwu also on IR, and in Green Bay, cornerback Jair Alexander is questionable, but probably going to play against DJ Moore. If he doesn't, DJ Moore maybe is a bit more interesting, but I'm probably benching him regardless of Jair's status. In Houston, defensive lineman Will Anderson, questionable. He missed last week, not expecting him to play once again. And defensive tackle Folorunso Fatukasi is questionable as well. Cornerback Kamari Lassiter, though, questionable, might return. In Las Vegas, cornerback Nate Hobbs, one of their better players, is out. And in the Chargers defense, linebacker Junior Colson is on IR. Cornerback Dean Leonard questionable. That's positive news. They might get him back. But unfortunately, Khalil Mack didn't practice Friday, is questionable. And if he doesn't play, maybe that's the difference. And maybe the Bengals will win. So some unfortunate news with Khalil Mack and Junior Colson. The Chargers may not be as safe of a play on defense. For the Rams, their offensive line is getting banged up again. Rob Havenstein is out and Joe Noteboom is doubtful. Just when you think they got them both back, now it looks like they won't play. In Miami, cornerback Kendall Fuller is out. In New Orleans, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry is questionable. He might return to the field. In the Jets, offensive line, left tackle Tyron Smith is out. Center Jake Hansen is out. And linebacker CJ Mosley also out. In Pittsburgh, linebacker Alex Highsmith is out. Cornerback CJ Henderson is out. And in San Francisco, this is one of the biggest pieces of news on the week. Cornerback Charvarius Ward is out with a personal situation. So that's great news for DK Metcalf. I think that was the biggest concern I had for DK with no Charvarius. I think he's a safer play. But defensive tackle Kevin Givens is out. Defensive end Nick Bosa, questionable. Left tackle Trent Williams, also questionable, but I think both of them will suit up. Last team would be Tennessee, and same situation as last week in their secondary. Safety Quandre Diggs is on IR. Cornerback Chidobe Awuzio is on IR. And for the fifth straight game, cornerback L'Jarius Sneed is out. So some of their better players in the secondary not available. Sam Darnold should be fine. But lastly, I do want to bring up some weather updates. They're very minimal, almost completely negligible. I could skip over them entirely. But in Chicago, there's a 15% chance of rain, 1-5, not 5-0, and the wind is only 10 miles per hour. So very minimal, but there's a slight chance the rain does pick up in this game. In San Francisco, a 24% chance of rain, not enough to really worry about. Otherwise, the weather's perfect. And in Miami, it is 81 degrees. That's kind of irrelevant, but the wind is 12 miles per hour. That's the worst weather update I could really find. So pretty irrelevant this week. Weather's not a factor. And with that in mind, now let's pivot to my rankings. I'm going to update the running back position first, where really there's very few changes. I did remove Tank Bigsby, who was previously outside the top 35, so kind of not a player I was considering in the first place, and nothing really changes inside my top 20. I will mention Aaron Jones. I'm a bit more confident in him, but he was already at the top of this tier at number 18. He's still a player I'm starting now that he's off the injury report. That's good news for him. But Cam Akers does lose value. We'll get to him in a sec. And it's an interesting situation in Pittsburgh, but I will not change my ranking on both Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. Najee's off the injury report. You're definitely feeling safer with him. But Jaylen Warren might not play. If he does, I'm going to keep him here. I think there's a lot of check down targets for Warren in this game plan. So I think he'll still be a fine high-end flex play. I think similar to Nick Chubb and Najee, Jaylen Warren is fine as a flex play. But if he doesn't suit up, I think Najee would move up just behind Aaron Jones. I'd rank him above DeAndre Swift, but the matchup against Baltimore is not great. Not a massive upgrade, just 2 spots higher for Najee. But obviously, Warren would be not worth starting if he doesn't play. And I'll get to Cordell Patterson in just a bit. But I actually forgot to mention, I actually had a conversation in the comments back in the running back video where I think my original take on Tony Pollard was a bit too high. Given the committee he was in with Tyjae Spears, I did bump him down 4 spots. Previously had him above Najee Harris. Now he's behind Brian Robinson. So Tony Pollard I don't think is the safest play. I'd rather bench Pollard this week than trust him. Tyjae Spears is a bit more involved than I gave him credit for. So almost forgot to mention, but Pollard does move down 4 spots. Beyond them, outside the top 25, there are very few changes. Only at RB 31 are there any differences, and it's only because Cam Akers moved down 10 spots. I mentioned him on Tuesday as an interesting pickup with contingent upside if Aaron Jones would not play. But now we know for sure Aaron Jones will suit up, and Akers is now just a handcuff. So in the same vein as guys like Zamir White, Jerome Ford, Zach Charbonnet, I think Akers is a low-end bench stash, but he is more valuable than Ty Chandler. So he moves down 10 spots, and everybody else above him does move up at least 1 spot. But with Tank Bigsby coming out of the mix, Algier through Zamir White move up 2 spots, and I did upgrade Ray Davis a total of 4 because of all of the injuries in the Bills offense. I think maybe they lean on the run just a little bit more. Maybe the receivers are less open, and perhaps Josh Allen checks it down to Ray Davis 1 or 2 more times. So that makes him a little more interesting. He moves up 4 spots overall. He jumps Justice Hill, Tyjae Spears, Cam Akers, and Tank Bigsby overall. But I also mentioned Cordero Patterson is an interesting handcuff option. If you really need Jaylen Warren, maybe stash Cordero Patterson. He looked good before he got hurt earlier in the season when Warren was inactive previously. So potentially there's a role for Patterson this week. But in the event that Warren does not play, I would bump him up from running back 50 up to number 33. I would rank him right between Javonte Williams and Ray Davis. I think he'd be an interesting backup to Najee, but probably not safe enough to start. I'd rather go with one of the Broncos running backs than Cordy P. So the risk of him getting re-injured is concerning, but he did look good before that happened earlier in the season. Cordero Patterson would move up to RB33. So those are all the changes at running back, mainly just Bigsby moving out and Cam Akers moving down. But at wide receiver, we do make a few other changes as well. We add T. Higgins to the top 10. Previously, I had him unranked, didn't think he would play. And now that we know that's for sure going to happen, he's a much safer start. So right behind CeeDee Lamb, right above Cedrick Tillman. I think given how he's played this season, an average of 15.3 points in his previous 4 games, he is a locking lineup. Definitely a stud. His chemistry with Joe Burrow is fantastic. And although the Chargers secondary might get corner Dean Leonard back, I think that'll be mainly a focus for Jamar Chase. So Chase, I'm keeping at number 1. He's been so good this season. I still expect him to be the best play. But T. Higgins in the top 10 steals all the value from Mike Gesicki, as well as maybe some targets from Chase Brown. T. Higgins probably finds the end zone. I would start him against the Chargers. So that's why these other players behind him move down 1 spot, but no change in opinion on all of them. However, I do feel a lot more confident in DK Metcalf with the combination of Noah Fant being out. That's probably 1 or 2 more targets for DK, combined with the fact that he's fully healthy, was never limited in practice this week, as well as the fact that Charvarius Ward will not suit up. That was the main concern. Ward sometimes locks him down. So Metcalf is much safer. I'm upgrading him at 9 spots. Now I think that touchdown is a much more likely thing to bet on. So I think the Seahawks are competitive here. I think Metcalf probably finds the end zone, and with safer target volume headed his way, I do think he's a top 20 play. So I know I downgraded him earlier in the week, but I think that argument is less interesting now that Charvarius Ward will not suit up. DK Metcalf, a top 20 play. I now rank him above guys like Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill, right behind DeAndre Hopkins and Drake London. But I did swap Cortland Sutton and Ladd McConkey. I think all the injuries in Atlanta's secondary make Sutton slightly more interesting. And McConkey, obviously, is a bit touchdown dependent. Sutton has been a little better, safer floor as of late. So swap the 2 of them. So McConkey moves down a total of 3 spots, Sutton only 1 spot. But Amari Cooper, I think, is much more interesting, especially with Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid both ruled out. I think as long as Cooper does suit up, he is a legit flex play. I have him right above Khalil Shakir, the 2 players back to back. Shakir remains a very good flex play, moving up 1 spot overall. With no Kincaid, he's probably even safer than previously. But Amari Cooper, I think, is a bit more interesting for a touchdown. And as I mentioned earlier on Wednesday, he does have 200 yards against the Chiefs in his last career game against them. But that was with the Raiders back in like 2017. It's been a long time, and maybe it's irrelevant. But Cooper, I do think, finds the end zone. I think Josh Allen trusts him in this matchup. Amari Cooper, I think, is worth starting right behind Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs. Him and Khalil Shakir are probably good for 9+ points in week 11. But Davante Adams gets jumped by 4 players overall, so he moves down 4 spots. I did bump up Jameson Williams 4 spots because I think with no Sam LaPorta, his touchdown odds are much more interesting. So a safe target share for Jameson this week. I think his floor is viable, and obviously his ceiling is elite. So JMO moves up 4 spots. I think he's a legit flex option this week. And as he moves up, one of the players moving down that he jumps would be Brian Thomas Jr. I just worry about the Lions matchup combined with Mac Jones. I don't think he's as safe. So I didn't change my projection on Brian Thomas that much, but I do think Juwan Jennings is a better option this week. It's a much better matchup for Jennings. And I also think Jameson Williams is safer. So along with Amari Cooper and T. Higgins, jumping him, that's 5 players overall, and that's why he does move down. But it's kind of the same expectation for Brian Thomas. You're just hoping for garbage time with Mac Jones against Detroit. So he moves down, and those other players get jumped by 3 players. So those are all of the changes. Not much of a difference, in my opinion, on guys like JSN and Lockett. But Josh Downs, I think, is staying exactly where I previously ranked him, even though Michael Pittman does enter the rankings. I basically swapped Michael Pittman with Alec Pierce, but I do think Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer are slightly more interesting and better matchups than Pittman. Pittman with Richardson is just not as safe, so at wide receiver 44, I'd probably just bench him. I think he's a big gamble, really touchdown dependent, and that's kind of what you were getting with Alec Pierce in the first place. So he slides in, Alec Pierce moves way down, and outside the top 50, I did add Deontay Johnson. I think in the revenge game, there's a potential touchdown for him. I think maybe they were saving him for this matchup, but he's done nothing with the Ravens, so I don't think I can quite trust him just yet. Cedrick Wilson, I didn't rank previously, so he moves into the rankings at number 52. I don't think I trust him, but I do have him 1 spot above MVS. MVS moves down 4 spots. I think he's a little less interesting with Cedrick Wilson, but both players are touchdown dependent. That's kind of the name of the game. Outside the top 50, maybe they're worth a swing in DFS, but overall, the only other change would be Alec Pierce moving down 18 spots. He is nowhere near as interesting with Pittman healthy. So everybody else moving down just gets jumped by other players who enters the ranks. And the main changes at receiver would be T. Higgins, a must start. Metcalf, I think, is safer with no Charvarius Ward. And then Amari Cooper, a much better flex play, along with Jameson Williams. But Brian Thomas Jr., probably less interesting, and Michael Pittman, not quite safe enough, despite coming back to the field. Other than that, at quarterback, the only change, I think, is in regards to Matthew Stafford. I'm worried about this cross-country road trip they have to take. I think he's less safe. I bumped him down 2 spots. Already a player I told you to bench, but now behind guys like Tua Tagovailoa and Derek Carr. I now have Stafford at 23. Previously, he was at 21, but not going to start him either way. And then at tight end, I did remove Noah Fant, but I had him at number 21 already. So not a guy I was starting in the first place. Players that bump up behind him would be Freiermuth, Schultz, Juwan Johnson, Tyler Conklin, and now Chigo Okonkwo does crack the top 25. But then at tight end, I kind of reevaluated my Chargers take. I think if Khalil Mack doesn't suit up, that would be a very bad situation. So with no Junior Colson as well, they move down 6 spots. I do worry about them against Joe Burrow. This game could be very high scoring. So they move down 6 spots overall, and I do kind of like the Patriots a little bit more. I talked myself into it. The Rams have to travel. The Patriots move up 5 spots. The Saints move up 1. And then these other 4 teams stay put as the Chargers do move down. So those are the only changes at quarterback, tight end, and defense. Here they are on the screen, the top 20. You can pause it to make those lineup decisions. Here it will be on the screen for a few more seconds. But now we will pivot to my flex rankings, and here are the final ranks over there, where I do trust the top 24 running backs all the way through Nick Chubb and Brian Robinson. I do think those are the safe starters at running back this week. I think Pollard is kind of the cutoff point. I'd rather start benching players once we hit Tony Pollard. And if you're debating between Pollard or wide receiver 32, Jameson Williams, I think I would rather go with JMO. I think him and Brian Thomas and Jacoby Myers would be the better players than the running backs outside the top 25. So that's going to be it for all these updates. But lastly, I will not make any changes to my win-loss picks. I am very tempted to go with the Bengals, honestly, over the Chargers, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stick with the Chargers to win. However, I am going to update some lines against the spread. Things got a bit easier for me, and I will take the extra half point for Pittsburgh. So going to avoid the push. The Steelers line is better. Plus 3.5. I do recommend Pittsburgh is the side to take. The Colts, I think, also went straight up. So give me the dog. And previously I had them at plus 3. Now the line is plus 4. And I can probably avoid a push from a field goal type of win by the Jets. So I'll do that. I'll take the +4 line on Indianapolis. It got a bit easier for me. And then it also got a bit easier for Green Bay. The line went down a point. I don't really understand why. So I'll take Green Bay -5.5 instead of 6.5. So those are my picks this week. I'm tempted to remove the Seahawks and give you Cleveland -1. I do think the Browns will win. I'm also tempted to take the Broncos -2. I also think Denver will win. The Bengals +1.5. Also very tempting, but I'm going to stay put. I'm going to keep it how it originally was. What I said on Monday is what I'll stick with. So that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. If you still have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I will answer them before kickoff. But my name is Adam Riancho. I will see you next time, and thank you so much for watching. Nice and blunt.